Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Farber. Hey, you may not know this, but this podcast, Love is Just Damn Good Business, by some startling coincidence, is also the title of my most recent book, which is called, wait for it, Love is Just Damn Good Business. So if you've been enjoying these interviews, I'm sure you'll love the book. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever it is that you acquire books nowadays. And also for this particular episode, you can find it and all of the others at stevefarber.com/podcast. You'll hear the audio. You can watch the video. You can read the entire transcript. It's all there in one convenient location. My guest today is Barry Rassin. And there is so much that I can say in introduction to Barry, but Barry is known around the world. Now, let's start out by acknowledging that a lot of people nowadays claim to be known around the world, right? I like podcasts, for example. Yeah, I had a download from Lithuania, so I am known around the world. That's not what it means in Barry Rassin's case. He is quite literally known around the world. Barry is a past president of Rotary International, the years 2018 to 2019. So Rotary changes its leadership, its presidencies, and all the way from the top down to club presidents every year. So he was the president of the whole shebang, and every year the new Rotary president chooses a theme for their tenure, and Barry's theme was "Be the Inspiration," and an appropriate theme it is for Barry. A little bit about him. So he comes out of the healthcare industry. He's a Bahamian. He's a fellow. He was the first fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives in the Bahamas. He retired as president after 38 years of the Doctors Hospital Health System in Nassau, Bahamas. He's still a director of that organization. They've seen that organization grow from 11 employees to 600, a thriving healthcare business still in the Bahamas. And his work around the world through Rotary and also through really significant relief efforts. For example, if you remember the notorious earthquake in Haiti, he coordinated $6.5 million worth of Rotary efforts and 105 projects in Haiti after the earthquake, and continues to assist with disaster relief efforts in Haiti, Houston, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, Mexico, the Caribbean, and other places around the world. In his native land of the Bahamas, he was awarded by the government as an officer of the Order of Distinction of the Bahamas. I don't know exactly what that means, but it is really impressive sounding. Rotary itself awarded Barry with the Service Above Self Award. And as you may recall, because it's fairly more recent, the Bahamas was hit with that devastating Hurricane Dorian, which decimated the two major northern islands of that country. And Barry's been very much involved in the ongoing relief efforts there as well. So a humanitarian, a philanthropist, and an incredibly inspiring leader. Barry, welcome to the podcast. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Steve. It's really good to be with you. Appreciate that very kind introduction.
My pleasure. And there's so much more that could have been said, but we'll get to a lot of that. I want to have our conversation. This is not. It's not going to be all about Rotary, but obviously Rotary is a big part of who you are, and is a big part of your opportunity to lead in a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multicultural sort of a way, both during your tenure as president, but also, certainly before and since. So I want to, for our listeners, Rotary has a certain image. There's a certain, I know for me anyway, when I first started to learn about the organization, and I'm not a member of Rotary as of yet, but I've learned a lot about the organization because, for one thing, I spoke at the International Convention in Hamburg, which you kindly invited me to come to. So I got a really good immersion with 25,000 Rotarians from around the world, and taking the stage in front of those folks, and then hanging out for a few days and having a lot of conversations with a lot of people. But I had this certain preconceived notion about what Rotary is. And I can summarize it like this. I always pictured Rotary as a club of kind of, middle-aged guys getting together once a week at a steakhouse and hanging out, smoking cigars. I don't know. That was just my image of Rotary, and boy, was I off. So I know I'm doing a lot of talking so far, but I promise to turn it over to you in just a second, because I want to give the context to what Rotary really is for people who are listening who are not familiar with the organization. So I'm going to read a couple of things from the website, rotary.org, from their Who We Are section. And here's what the organization says about itself. Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. It says, in terms of what we do, Rotary members believe that we have a shared responsibility to take action on our world's most persistent issues. Our 35,000 plus clubs work together to, this is quite a hit list, promote peace, fight disease, provide clean water, sanitation, and hygiene, save mothers and children, support education, and grow local economies. The mission, it says, is we provide service to others, promote integrity, and advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through our fellowship of business, professional, and community leaders. And the vision statement is, together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. And just one more thing I want to add, because I want to talk to you specifically about this in just a few minutes. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big deal to Rotary. And here's the language. As a global network that strives to build a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change, Rotary values diversity and celebrates the contributions of people of all backgrounds, regardless of their age, ethnicity, race, color, abilities, religion, socioeconomic status, culture, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. That is what Rotary is about. And that is, I'm guessing, what attracted you to Rotary to begin with. So I'd like to start, Barry, with your story. So tell us a little bit about your journey in life and what led you to the work that you do in Rotary.
Wow, that's a long story. Well, born in London, England, my parents moved to the Bahamas when I was 3 weeks old, and he was the first surgeon in the country. So, and my mother was a nurse, so they were busy, always. By the time I was 10, they asked me, do I want to go away to school? And I figured, well, they work all the time anyway, no point in being home. So I agreed to go to a boarding school up in Massachusetts, got my education up there. Never was a particularly good student, but I managed to get through it and ended up get a bachelor's degree, master's degree in hospital administration, and worked at Mount Sinai Medical Center for about 5 years to get my healthcare background. During that time, interestingly, one of my doctors asked me if I would join Rotary. I had no idea what Rotary was. Much like you, I'm thinking, and when I looked at the club and saw everybody about 30 years older than me, I said, no, I don't think so. So I didn't join Rotary when I was in the US. When I came home to the Bahamas, my dad basically was getting on in age. The building he had been using was getting run down. So I came home to try to restart and create a private hospital in the country. And I was just excited by that. And of course, learned pretty quickly that just because I'm excited doesn't mean anybody else is. So it took me a while, but I worked hard to develop a core group who helped me to develop the hospital into what it is today, is the one that's recognized as the leading hospital in the region, the only accredited hospital in this part of the world for a long time. I think there's one other one now in Belize, and accredited through an American group, because I always set our standards based on US standards. Since in the Bahamas, they didn't really have any hospital standards. So I wanted good standards. So my first year in, extremely frustrating. It's like hitting my head against a wall. And I was breaking the wall and my head at the same time. And I had have three kids. They were young when they came here, so big adjustment for them, big adjustment for my wife. And I remember we were at a horse show. I was watching my two girls ride the horses, and I'm the only one in the bleachers. But I see over to my side over here, this group of guys hanging out, selling hamburgers, hot dogs, and drinking beer. Mostly drinking beer, because I was the only one there who would buy anything. And as I'm watching my kids ride, one of the fellas came over to me, and he recognized that I was here, who I was, and that I was starting this new hospital. So he asked me, why don't you come to lunch with me? And I'm thinking, I'm an introvert. I'm very shy. I'm not sure I could do this. But on the other hand, I'm in a small country. I'm back home, but who knows me these days? So I need to meet these people. They are the movers and the shakers in the business world in the country. I need them to know what I'm doing, because I need their support. So I said, okay. He took me to the next week and took me a few times for them to get to know me, and vice versa. And I asked him for a list of all the members of the club. There was over 100 members back then. Still, now we're about 150. And I asked him for a list, because I said, the only way I'm going to do this with my shyness is to make a list and consciously meet at least 2 new people every single week. And that's exactly what I did. So
what year was this?
That was 1980, 40 years ago. And one of the things we do in Rotary is a new member stands up in front of the club, and usually it's a 3 to 5 minute, who am I? But since I was starting a new business, they asked me to do a speech for 20 minutes. I had never in my life, master's degree, I was assistant director of a hospital, never made a speech in front of a bunch of people. So I was petrified. And I remember I wrote my speech, and it's sitting on the lectern, and I got to the bottom of the first page. I was so nervous I couldn't let go of the lectern to change the page. That's how it all started. And I remember a fellow in the back of the room stood up to ask a question at the end. He said, I just want to know one thing. Why did your dad fire my mother? What? That was kind of a learning lesson that in Rotary, you're going to get a lot of cracks. You're going to get a lot of things, but it's all in good humor. So I learned that lesson quickly. And, for the first couple of years, I'm just a member of a club. I'm networking. I'm getting to know the right people. I'm helping grow my business. I didn't really still understand Rotary until one day they came up to me, and I guess about 2 years in, I was chairman of community service, which is the committee that helps to develop the local community. And they came up to me and said, there's a lady by the name of Rosebud Bell. She's in a wheelchair. She has diabetes. She now needs eye surgery. And we need to get her to Florida, because nobody in the Bahamas does this kind of eye surgery. So your community service chair, get her to a hospital over there to get the surgery. She needs to restore her sight. So I said, okay, how much is my budget? He said, oh, there is no budget. Oh, okay. So what I did was we have a directory for Rotarians around the world. So I looked up for Rotarians in Miami. Bascom Palmer is a fantastic eye institute. I knew about it because I worked over there. So I called a Rotarian out of the blue, explained what I was doing. He said, oh, no problem. We have a member of the club who works there, and he can help you. So I called him. He said, no problem. Bascom Palmer will waive all expenses. You just got to get her in. He said, no problem. Can you refer me to a doctor? Sure. I know a doctor in one of my another Rotary club gave me his number. I called him. He said, yeah, sure, I'll do it, no charge. So now I got the hospital, I got the doctor. I said, you happen to know anybody who works in a hotel? Oh yeah, there's a hotel right across the street and the manager is a Rotarian. I need his number. I called him. Of course, no charge. We'll give you 2 rooms, one for the mother, one for the daughter, for as long as you need them. Okay, now I just need to get her there. So I go to my local airline, Bahamas Air. Can you help me? Of course, no problem, no charge. This was a Rotarian who happened to work at Bahamas Air.
Wow.
I mean, within 24 hours, I was able to get a complete free ride for her. And we gave her some money for food so that she could go over, have surgery, save her eyesight, and get her back. Just a few phone calls to who I suddenly realized everybody in that book is now a friend. And all you have to do is call them and ask, and they're going to help you. And that just opened my eyes to what this organization is all about.
So that network of members of Rotary from various parts of, I mean, they're all fairly close to the Bahamas, Florida, wherever, they're in that organization. This is what I infer from what you just said. They're in the organization in order to do that very thing, in order to be called upon to help people in times of need. And is that the way the whole organization works around the world? I mean, did you find that kind of initial formative experience for you, does that hold true? Is it fairly consistent?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to a number of people and they can tell me a very similar story in various parts of the world. I mean, I could share a number of those kind of stories with you. That's one aspect of what Rotary is all about. On their own, without those phone calls, they're already looking at their community and doing projects in their community. And one thing we ask every club to do is to do international service as well as local service, because we are Rotary International. So most clubs get involved with another club in another part of the world, and they partner in doing a project together. And so we do a lot of that kind of thing as well.
So your initial experience was, I'm going to be, a big deal in this local hospital. I need to be connected to the local community. Rotary is a good place to be connected. They get together, they cook burgers and they drink beer. So that brought you in. Then you started going to meetings, and then you had that opportunity to really be of service. And you saw everybody come together in that way. Now, this is going to be a real fast forward kind of a question, but obviously that drew you in, kept you there, and opened your eyes to, I mean, here you are in the Bahamas, a tiny little country, and it opened your eyes to what's possible, kind of impact you can make on the global level. And eventually, lo and behold, you are in line to be the president of the whole international organization. So what was it that you saw that inspired you to step into that role? That's just a massive and massively important role.
I never had an ambition to be president of Rotary International, the global president. I never even dreamt it possible. As you say, I'm just an island boy from the Bahamas. Who am I to think that I could accomplish that? So my entire journey was about doing good service every chance I had, whether it was local or international. You heard about Haiti, did a lot of projects in Haiti as part of my district. So we have our own club in our own country, but our district has 10 countries. So we all work closely together. So I got to know the district. I got 10 countries, so it's already international. And some of our meetings were in the US, so I got to know a lot of them. So it was just a matter of really doing good in the world, which was what we're all about, and enjoying every minute of it. And when you realize the people you help, not only the ones that I help, the ones that other people in the organization help, and you see what we do every year, it just blows you away. And I just love being a part of that. So it took a lot of years later when it's people in my district are coming to me and say, Barry, you should put your name in to be president. At first I laughed. My wife told him to go away because he doesn't have time. And, you got to be kidding. But I heard it over and over again. And so I kind of looked at the system of how it worked. And I got myself on the nominating committee for president for 2 or 3 times so that I could see the process. And they kept telling me I should do it. So, well, all right, let me try it. So I finally put my name in and eventually managed to actually get put in the position. So it was a shock, but awesome, absolutely awesome. Part of my drive to do that was, I could actually make a difference. Here's an organization that's changing the world, but it's 115 years old and it needs to change. And we're getting a lot of traditionalists to be president. They may not want me because I'm not a traditionalist, but if I manage to get there, maybe I actually could make some changes in how the organization works. And so that was my personal drive to do it.
So what is a so-called traditionalist approach look like versus the approach that you wanted to bring to the organization?
Part of it goes back to what you were saying. We have these older members, and many clubs, the average age is 65, 70. We weren't pushing for younger. We weren't pushing for gender equality. We were just we were successful. And I think the danger of success is that you just rely on doing the same thing over and over again. Whereas I like to think we should do things differently because you can build on your success. I believe we should be double the number of members we have if we just tell the world what we do, because they want to be a part of making the world better. I know that. So I blame us for not, we talk to ourselves. We have district conferences, we have conventions, we do fantastic. We give great leadership speeches, but we're always talking to ourselves. We need to do what we're doing right here today, is to talk to people who are not Rotarians so they understand better who we are, what we do, and why they should be a part of this organization.
So your emphasis was going to be on how do we bring in more of the younger generation of folks, millennial, Gen Z, and there's another related organization called Rotaract, which is specifically for that. And that was a big part of your emphasis as president, right? So I'd like you to address that, but also tell us a little bit about your experience in that presidency, because then all of a sudden you were traveling all around the world to meet all of these folks in all parts of the globe. So I'd love to know a little bit about your experience there, and also how you reached out specifically to youth and diversity of religion and ethnicity and gender and all of that.
We have a number of youth programs. One was Rotaract, which is 18 to 30-year-olds. One is Interact, which is 16 to 18-year-olds, basically high school. And we even have an Early Act, which starts in primary school. And we have a Rotary leadership program. We have youth exchange. We do a lot of programs for youth. But in my personal opinion, we treated them like they're kids, okay? Now, maybe some of them are, but when you get to Rotaract and you got a 28-year-old who's finished college, is working, or not even go to college, but is working and being part of the local economy and doing service in the economy, I'm saying to myself, why are we not treating these folks like equals? These 18 to 30-year-olds especially. They need to be right. They're Rotarians. They're doing what we do. They just do it differently, which, by the way, is a good thing. So I went to our Council of Legislation and asked to change our constitution to change them from a program to so the Rotaract Club would be a member of Rotary International, just like a Rotary Club is a member of Rotary International. So we elevated, we talk about this as elevating Rotaract. We elevated them to equality. And now you've got these 18 to 30-year-olds who were excited because finally we're respecting them. And that's all they were looking for. They made it very clear to me that they don't want to go to boring meetings. They don't want to spend a lot of money on dues and things like that. And it's difficult for them to come into a club that they're the youngest by 30 years. However, they really want to change the world like we're changing the world. They love what we do with service. They want to be a part of it. So after changing the Constitution, which was it's another long story, a serious challenge. Again, 538 delegates have to vote, and most of them are the traditionalists. So they're thinking, why do we need to change? They voted it down the first time. I love social media, which a lot of my friends are now picking up that it's important. But I sent word to the Rotaract members around the world, I need your help. Call your representative of the Council of Legislation. I'm going to go for another vote tomorrow. Bring it back. They did. We brought it back on the floor, and they voted for it this time. So we changed the Constitution. From that time, that was April of last year. From that time, we've been changing policies and procedures to bring them. Now we have Rotaractors on international committees, on local committees. We treat them as equals. They're on the books. They're just like a Rotary club. And because of that, they've grown by 3,700 clubs in the last year and a half, which is incredible. We've never done that before. So now the challenge is to change the culture. As you know, changing the culture is the hard part. So I do a lot of speaking engagements, both to Rotary clubs and Rotaract clubs, to change the culture so we move together. And you saw in our vision statement, it's about togetherness. And if we can get Rotaractors to get to know Rotarians and vice versa, they create relationships, then they want to work together. If that 250,000 people in Rotaract join Rotary, we've just grown our organization for the first time in 20 years.
Wow. You know, what I hear in that is, it's one thing to say, you know, we should treat our younger, you know, those Rotaract kids, we should treat them more as equals. So come on, guys, let's just let's do an attitude change and have a different perspective about who these are. That's one way of doing it. What you did is work to change it systemically by literally changing the constitution of the organization to elevate them to full membership. There's a huge difference between the talking and the deep systemic changes that oftentimes get overlooked when we're looking at, you know, the catchphrase is that we call it nowadays, you just said, is changing a culture. So you are changing the culture, obviously, but I mean, that's a significant change in the culture, but you say there's still more culture change work to do. And what I'd like you to focus on just for a little bit, because I'm just really fascinated by this. You know, I read those words a few minutes ago from the Rotary website about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This idea of diversity and inclusion has really always been there for Rotary, hasn't it? There's how many years?
115 years.
115 years, but I have a feeling that diversity wasn't interpreted the same way 100 years ago as it is now.
It certainly wasn't. Well, you know, we started as a men's organization. 4 guys got around table and they started the whole thing. It was about fellowship and networking, and they grew into service, and we just grew from there. So it was known as a men's organization. But in our bylaws and constitution, it states that every Rotary club should represent their community. So when you think about that, if we represent our community, how come we're all men? And by the way, we're getting older by now, so we're all old men. That's not representing our community. So we started a number of years ago with the gender difference. And 89 was when we first officially started allowing women to join Rotary clubs. And it's grown. Some parts of the world we're 50-50, some parts of the world we're 35% female. There's a couple of countries that are only about 11%. Cultural again, you know, in their cultures, women don't get to do that. We're trying to change that as well. But so we've grown a lot in gender over time. Effort was, okay, now let's hit the age, and we've grown a lot with that. And a year ago, January, is when we came out with our first diversity statement to DEI to make sure that, just to remind clubs, you represent your community. That means all aspects of the community, and diversity is a major part of that. So we've started with gender, we started with age. Honestly, in some parts of the world, bringing Blacks into our organization has not been as good as it should be. So we really need to address race and ethnicity next, I believe. But the sexual orientation and everything else we've talked about, disabilities, that should be addressed as well. So it's a journey we're on, but I think we're really making some good headway.
So in the early days of Rotary, was diversity was specifically spelled out as one of the organizational values? Just that word itself?
It was, but it was from the standpoint of, we started, when you came into a Rotary Club in the early years, you would represent your profession or your job classification. So I represented hospital administration. And back then in a club, only one person could be from a classification. So our diversity was professional. So we'd have a plumber, an electrician, a businessman, a banker, a lawyer, accountant, et cetera, et cetera. So that was our first definition of diversity. So we've had to change from that and get into the real world of today.
So if somebody back then got in a time machine and landed here in, the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, learned about the internet, said, oh, there's a thing called a website. Then they went to the Rotary website and they read the following words: Rotary values diversity and celebrates the contribution of people of all backgrounds, regardless of their age, ethnicity, race, color, abilities, religion, socioeconomic status, culture, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. They would not have known, they wouldn't know what the hell you're talking about, for one thing. And so what that says, what's obvious here, just to state the obvious, is that you have, as an organization, redefined or expanded the definition of a value that has always existed, but you've expanded that definition to be relevant and important in today's world.
Exactly.
Versus just assuming that people will know what that means nowadays.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure we put it right into the Rotary clubs so they see that this isn't just something coming out of the bylaws. This is real and this is today. And you need to be proactive with making this change.
So tell us a little bit about your adventures around the world. Were there any particularly, I'm sure there were many, but were there any particularly poignant moments or lessons that you learned in your travels as president?
It was just an absolutely awesome time. Normally it's a 3-year journey. You're president nominee, president-elect, and president. Because the president nominee, as soon as he became president-elect, he passed away, which was very sad for the Rotary world. And somehow I ended up being asked to go in at that point. So president-elect, president, 2 years. And the first year was basically the first month. Normally it's the first year. I had a month to do the planning of what I was going to do for the year. You have to come up with your own theme for the year, be the inspiration. What are your goals? What do you want the clubs to accomplish? How are you going to award and reward individuals and clubs? And what are your major programs? Those kind of things. And a number of big meetings like the convention you went to that the president has to plan. So you have to get ready for all of that early on in the time. But pretty soon, within 2 months, you start traveling. Clubs and districts invite you to this meeting and that meeting, and you start talking and listening. And I think one of the challenges of many leaders today is they don't listen. And I really wanted to hear from Rotarians, what do they want from Rotary? And what do they want us to do differently? And that was a fascinating opportunity to hear. And everywhere I went to 60 countries in a year and a half. And everywhere I went, I would ask to not only meet with the Rotarians, but to meet with the Rotaractors so that I could hear from them directly. What is the challenge? And that really helped us to focus on what we have to change first in order to get to where we want to be eventually. But the experiences, anywhere you went in the world, and we would go, we were going from, one trip 6 weeks away from home. You start off in South Korea. We went to Taiwan, back to Africa for a meeting, back to Japan for a meeting, then over to England. Then we hopped. Esther came home. She was exhausted. I went to Turkey to meet with a few districts in Turkey. It's insane. I loved every minute of it. Believe me, I'm not complaining, because I got to meet good people. I have to tell you, I quote your book very often about the radical leap, especially, because I go way back with that. And the love that these people have for their communities, for the world, for their members of their clubs, that's what drives all of us, because we care about people. And that's what I think makes us unique. We're not just out there helping people. We're out there because we love people. We're going to help them, and we're going to make them better. And we would go, that trip I mentioned, there was one part of that, it was 36 hours to get to where we were going. We arrived at 11 o'clock at night, and there's 150 Rotarians at the airport to meet us. That's crazy. We're exhausted, right? That's no easy task to be smiling and happy, but you have to, because they've got out of their way to make sure that they take care of you. They'll walk you through customs and immigration. They help any way they possibly can. One thing about Rotarians in these countries, they're usually pretty well connected. They can call somebody in government and get help for whatever they need. If we're going to do a big project, they can meet with the prime minister and say, hey, we're going to do this. Can you work with us? Those kind of things. In the 60 countries I went to, I met with 45 presidents, prime ministers, where I could talk about Rotary and ask them to support their local Rotary clubs. And again, it's about that togetherness and partnership. If we're working well with the government, if we're working well with other NGOs, there's so much we could do because we're together and not sitting in a silo. A spin-off from this, after presidency, when I come home, the governor of the country asked me to chair this thing called Volunteer Bahamas. He wants me to bring volunteerism as a new part of the culture. And so I'm working with all the NGOs, bringing them all together. And they're coming. They want to work together too. But I remember in Kenya, the Rotaractors said, yeah, they want to meet with me too, but they don't want to meet in a conference room. They want to take me on a 2-mile walk through the Karura forest. And we did. We walked in 2 miles and out 2 miles, and I'd have a Rotaractor on each side tell me about their life and their ambitions and Rotary and Rotaract. And when the people behind them thought they'd had enough, they pushed them out of the way and they got 2 more. What an incredible experience to hear about young people from all cultures and all parts of the world and what they want to do to make our world a better place. Truly, it was a special time in my life.
Wow. And was there any particular common theme or themes that emerged, particularly from the Rotaractors, the younger folks that you met, regardless of where they were on the planet?
Yes, the common theme was we're frustrated. We don't join Rotary clubs because we don't see a Rotary club that is adaptable to younger people, but we want to do service. It was consistent in all cultures, and that's why we set about making the changes we did, so that because we were only having 4% of Rotaractors move into Rotary when they finish Rotary.
Oh wow!
What a waste! We've got these people who want to do service, want to do Rotary, know who we are, and they leave us because they don't want to do it the way we do it. So my message to Rotary clubs is ask them what they want you to do different and adjust, be adaptable. We have to be relevant to our young professionals in this world. And they're doing it. I've been to, it's all Zoom these days, but I've been to at least 10 meetings in Brazil with Rotaract and Rotary, just talking about that one issue. They're working hard to make it happen and make it work. It's happening. It really is, which is exciting to see something in this organization change that quickly. It's really great.
So nowadays we're having this conversation in the long middle, as we've been calling it lately, the long middle of the pandemic, and you're still traveling around the world from your home in the Bahamas. How many international meetings do you find yourself doing in a single day nowadays?
I do 7 or 8 Zoom calls a day.
Wow, all over the world.
All over the world. I've been to 25 countries in the last 3 months. And,
That's
numerous times in case of Brazil, Africa too. I go there quite often. And the Rotaractors especially want me now. The interactors, because they're saying, "Hey, you fixed Rotaract. Now we want you to help us." So I talk to some of the interact groups around the world.
And that's the high school age kids.
That's the high school age. Yeah.
Oh, that's a huge opportunity also, and a big passion of mine.
Yeah, I mean, when you start inculcating that spirit of volunteerism in a young kid, they're going to grow up wanting to do it the rest of their life. And that's where you got to start with these kind of things. So, yeah, that's exciting to me to get them so pumped up. I now have a reputation in most of these places I go, from the Rotaractors. They call me Uncle Barry. They are very complimentary. It's wonderful, but they're the ones doing the work. So it's nice.
Well, your theme for your presidency was "Be the Inspiration," and we all know the power of leading by example. If you're going to ask other people to be inspiring, it better be starting from the top. You better embody that inspiration yourself. And man, do you ever? Again, this is all anecdotal. I didn't do like an official survey or anything like that, but I'll tell you that just in my experience of talking with Rotary folks around the world, which I did not only at the conference, but since then, virtually. Whenever your name comes up, it's always couched in such a warm feeling of love and admiration for who you are and what you do. And if I can inject just a personal note for a second, because you mentioned it a few minutes ago, the way you and I connected, this is the way I remember it. Was when you were putting together the conference in Hamburg, and we got a call or an email one day at the office saying that the president of Rotary International, Barry Rassin, would like to invite me to come and speak at the conference. And it's like, well, that's cool, And then again, it was like, all of my perceptions about what Rotary was. So I started to do a little research, and you and I, we talked on the phone a couple of times as we were putting this together, but I hadn't met you. I didn't, so I did a little research. I went online, which is how we do it. And I found something online, which was a PDF, and it was your interview questions that you were asked when you were being considered as president. You went through an interview process where you actually had to ask or answer several questions, and it's online. I found it on a PDF online, just through a Google search. Do you remember?
Everything's on.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about what your answers were to some of those questions?
Not specifically, no. I'm sure I'd be consistent with it, but
I'll share.
It's an incredible process.
I'll share one of your answers.
Yeah,
I'm gonna paraphrase it because I don't have it here in front of me. But you were asked to describe your leadership philosophy, and you said something like, "My leadership philosophy is based on or influenced by the work of Steve Farber from his book, The Radical Leap, which stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof." And he said, and I'm reading this, and I'm telling you, Barry, it was like that. For me, it was, that's why I do this, because it was so profound for me. I mean, you can imagine, and this is, I mean, this because you see the influence of your work. For me, oftentimes I don't see the influence of my books because people pick it up and read it, and some are inspired by them. I'm sure others are not, right? I mean, it's like anything else. But to see that those ideas had an impact on you, and influence the way you lead and the impact that you have on the world. And I didn't even know that you existed when that was going on. So the fact that you reached out to me and inspired me to, to learn about who you were was so personally fulfilling for me, because that's, again, that anybody who writes a book, that's what we all hope for, or who writes, numbers of books. We hope that we have an influence. So I was so moved by that. And then when I got to know you and to see you in action and see, what you've done, I know that LEAP framework was really nothing more than a confirmation of who you already were and what you were already doing. It just brought it into relief for you. It wasn't like, the installation of some new operating system in Barry Rassin. It was just an articulation of the kind of person and kind of leader that you already are.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. As soon as I read that book, I said, this is it. I need people to know this is what they need to do. And I've been teaching it. I think I apologized to you at the conference early this year for quoting you so often. I always gave you the credit for it, but I use the radical leap in any leadership speech I ever give, because I think those 4 values are just critical to a great leader.
Well, you never have to apologize to an author for quoting their work. That's one thing. Yeah, that event, which I've referred to quite a bit on this podcast series, happened right before the pandemic and at the end of February in 2020. And one of the other speakers at the conference was the guest on our podcast on the previous week, from when people are listening to this podcast, Frank DeAngelis, who was the principal of Columbine High School. And as you know, and one of my great joys was seeing the two of you connect, because you guys have that similar quality of heart that's all about service, and particularly your interest in youth. And it was a touching moment where you got up and you awarded Frank, after his presentation, you awarded him with a special Rotary designation. What was that?
A Paul Harris Fellow. We have a way to say thank you to folks. We raise money by doing this. We donate $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation to get a Paul Harris Fellow, and then you can give that to whoever you put in for. And after hearing him speak, normally you can't get it quite as quickly as I did, but there was 2 Rotarians in the room, and I said, look, you're local. I'm from a distance. Any way you can get this for me quickly. We were able to do it and give him a Paul Harris. I didn't actually get the pen in time, but I did send it to him, and so he should have it by now.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, from my perspective, seeing two men, 2 great leaders that I admire so much, connect with each other like that was really remarkable. So I want to ask you, you've touched on this already, but I want to invoke the great philosopher Tina Turner, who asked the eternal question, age-old question, what's love got to do with it? So as you reflect on the great work that you've done, and as you look to the future and the things that you have yet to work on and accomplish, how would you answer that question, Barry, from a leadership perspective? What's love got to do with it?
It's all about what we do. It's about caring for people. I mean, whether if you're an employer, I'm telling you, you've got to care about your staff. You can't expect them to do anything you want if you don't care for them, and they know you don't care, and they're smart. So you've got to care for them. And when you do as a leader of a company, and they know you do authentically, they will do anything for you, and your company will boom. That's just a reality. So, and I see it in every facet of life. I see it in our Rotary clubs. You have a president of a club who cares for the members and calls them when they miss a meeting and say, hey, you okay? It makes a difference. It's the little things that show that you care. And when people know you care about not only them, but about people in general, and you care about animals even, when they know that that's the kind of person you are, and you at some point need them to help you with something, they don't even hesitate. They say, of course, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And I think that's what it's all about, is that being authentic, being real, being yourself, and caring for people in a real way, that brings back so much to you in order to get things done to help people. So it's a circle, the circle of love, I guess. But it really does work in all facets of life.
Yeah, and the nuance to that is, you can tell when somebody is quote unquote caring for you, or says the right words about love and respect and care. You can tell when that person is doing it because they want something from you. Whereas what you're saying is, if you just come from that authentic place of love and caring, you're not doing it because you want. It's not a quid pro quo. You're not waiting for that, return in productivity and energy and all that, in order to decide whether you're going to continue caring or loving for that person. You're doing it because you do. I love it because I do, because it's the right thing. And if there was ever a very clear example of love in action, it's the kind of work that you do, and it's the work that Rotary does as an organization. And I imagine it's also a reflection on the kind of people that the organization attracts. I'm going to assume you're not going to get a lot of people who don't already feel like it's important to make a difference in the world. I imagine you get some people that are there just to network, but I'm assuming
they don't last. They don't last. Within 2 years, they're usually gone.
Yeah.
But if you find somebody who's been in a Rotary Club for 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, they care, pure and simple. It always amazes me. I say it can come back to you. I think of Hurricane Dorian, when Dorian hit the Bahamas, and I'm on a committee for Rotary to do whatever we can to. 2 islands completely devastated, wiped out. We got to start from scratch. So I've got to get help. And I got response from 45 countries around the world. What can I do to help? And that's without me even asking. It kind of brings it back to you. You just got to show you care, and other people they also care, and they're going to want to help you when you have those kind of issues.
Absolutely. And when you're tied in around the world, it's and you have what an amazing opportunity that you personally have, and that we all have nowadays, to build those kind of relationships with no geographical borders, because we're connected virtually. Yep. And if there's an upside to the pandemic, I suppose that's it. The fact that you visited 25 countries in the last couple of months without getting on an airplane. And by the way, I love your language that you said, I've been to 8 different countries in the last week.
I tend to confuse people with that language, because that's what I use. I told somebody the other day, I'm in Brazil tonight, so I'm not sure I'll make it tomorrow. They took me seriously.
Yeah. Well, but the emotionally and even experientially, on some level, that's the truth.
Yeah.
When you're looking at somebody, through a computer, halfway around the world, you're, for that moment, in some significant way, you're in the room together.
Exactly.
I think that's a beautiful thing. And I love that you're using that language to describe it. So Barry, obviously people that want to learn about Rotary can go to rotary.org or check out, the local clubs in your area. And, like I said at the beginning, I am not at this juncture a member of Rotary, but I get closer to it every day. The more time I spend with people, and it's kind of an odd time right now, but there are some great clubs here in the San Diego area, and I've met quite a few people. So I'm getting that sense of community already, and I suspect that I'll be diving in with, I was going to say diving in with both feet, but that's more like jumping in. I don't know. It's kind of a...
Yeah, and if you ever want to join my Rotary Club, I can send you a Zoom Connect, and you could join us every Friday at 1:00 Eastern.
Fantastic. But for folks who would like to connect with you and have a correspondence with you, or you just connect in some way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Email's the best way. BarryJRassin@gmail.com.
Great.
I live on email, basically.
Yeah.
If I'm in a boring Zoom, I'll be doing email. But if I'm not on Zoom, normally I am catching up on my emails. I still getting, when I was president, I was getting 500 or 600 a day.
Yeah.
Now I'm down to maybe 100, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
You're, and I will say that you are quite responsive. You put me to shame.
I have a philosophy on that. You should never take more than 24 hours to answer an email. And, if you don't have the answer, you write back and say, I don't have the answer, but you should always respond. Nothing more frustrating than sending an email and hearing nothing. And I don't want to be one of those.
Thank you. Again, on a personal note, you are leaving me at the end of this episode with an overwhelming feeling of guilt. I need to do a lot better with. I'm very spotty at that, so I'm going to work on that. I'm going to make a commitment right now to work on that.
Excellent.
So I'll make sure that people have your email in the show notes and the post version of this, and I'm sure that anybody who takes you up on that offer will benefit greatly from your friendship.
Fantastic.
Barry, it's been great having you on the podcast, and thank you all for listening to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. And until next time, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.